What is up, guys? It's your boy, Matt Malloy, back with another video, and today we're doing the top 3 tips for the overhead press. And I totally said I was going to do the bench press next, but
I lied.
Truth is, I haven't done a traditional bench press in over 3 months now, which is pretty crazy. Been really gearing in for strongman competition, so I've been doing overhead press a whole bunch, so we'll cover that first. And then I'll go ahead and cover the bench press for you guys as well. Besides, I don't think the overhead press gets the love that it deserves. It is a fantastic strength movement. It is truly a raw test of strength. There's not a whole bunch of tricks you can do to get your overhead press up quickly. You really have to dedicate the time and the training to the overhead press to have a strong overhead press. I think it's a fantastic strength movement. That being said, no skits, no jokes today. It's gonna cut right to the chase and give you my top 3 tips for the overhead press. All right, guys, so tip number 1 is gonna be a 2-parter here, so you're getting a bonus tip, but it's going to be dealing with our grip width and then also our stance width. And these two are actually going to be opposites of each other. So with your grip width, you're gonna keep that nice and narrow, and then your stance width is gonna be nice and wide. So it should be fairly straightforward why we'd want that nice wide base for our overhead press. It's just gonna lower our center of gravity just a little bit, give us a bit more stability for pressing off of, and obviously we want as much stability as possible in this movement. A lot of times when I see someone overhead press for the first time, they'll be standing basically straight up with their feet almost right next to each other, and they may not notice it, but their core is actually doing a lot of work to compensate because they have to compensate for balance back and forth. Widen your width. You really don't have to compensate anymore. Take some load off your core, and you use that extra energy to help with getting the weight up. And then with grip width, there's 2 parts to this equation. So I said it was gonna be narrow. The other part you wanna keep in mind is that your arms are gonna be nice and parallel to each other. So I mean by parallel, it's gonna be like this, and we're not gonna be bent out in a V or brought in into like an A shape. The reason for this is just so we transfer as much of our force into the bar as possible. As long as our forearms are parallel to each other, all of our force possible is going directly into the bar, directly into pressing the bar up. If, however, our arms are slightly outwards or slightly inwards, we're now introducing another force vector to this equation. So not all of our energy is going into pushing it up. If our arms are outwards, some of our energy is actually going into pushing it sideways and up. And if our arms are inwards, some of our energy is actually going to pushing it in, if that makes sense, and up. Obviously, we don't want to waste any energy here, so just keep those forearms nice and parallel, and all of your energy possible will be going into pushing the bar up. Now the other thing I mentioned here is actually taking a nice narrow grip, making everything nice and compact, and I'll give you 2 options here. So the reason I mentioned the narrow grip is going to give you a nice tight upper back position and a really strong position to press off of. I find that a lot of people, when they switch to this nice tight position, they end up really liking it stylistically. It gives them that nice tight back position, and they feel like it's a really, really strong position to press off of. And that's just the reasoning for that. But I do recognize this isn't the only way to press. So a lot of times with ollie lifters, weightlifters, you'll see them a bit further out, and that just mimics what they have to do for competition. So that is a perfectly acceptable way to press as well, is a little bit further out. Their forearms are still parallel, but their grip width will be a little bit further out. So you can mess around with both of those. If you don't have to do weightlifting, if you're not an ollie lifter, I would recommend messing around with that narrow grip for a test run. Just keeps everything nice and compact, keeps your back nice and tight, and it's a nice stable position to press off of. No real secrets to that. All right, guys, moving on to tip number 2 here, and this is gonna be similar to what I mentioned for the deadlift, and that is bar path is absolutely crucial for the overhead press. So bar path for the overhead press is actually really straightforward. The bar is gonna be starting somewhere in between your chin and the bottom of your neck. For ollie lifters, they might actually start it off of their collarbones from that kind of jerk position, but it's gonna be starting somewhere in this position, and you're gonna have it nice and tight to your body. So you don't want the bar all the way out from your body. And then from this position, from wherever it's comfortable in this range, you are driving the bar back in a straight diagonal line until it is over top of your shoulder joint. Key there is that you're extending to no further past your shoulder joint. A lot of people will take the diagonal line back cue a little bit too far. They'll really overextend themselves. It's just an unstable position, and it's also just wasted energy. So once that bar is locked out over your shoulder joint, you're good to go. Now there's one crucial problem with the overhead press bar path, and that's this big thing right here. If you're doing an overhead press correctly and you don't move your head out of the way, your bar path would theoretically just kind of take your chin clean off as you were coming up. Pretty straightforward to solve this issue. You're basically just turtling your head backwards, giving the camera as many double chins as you possibly can, and as soon as that bar clears your head, you're driving yourself through. Let's face it, not gonna be the sexiest position you've ever been in, but if anyone makes fun of you, just stun on them with your strong overhead press. Now, in addition to getting your head out of the way, the other way you can kind of clear some space for yourself is starting with a kind of proud chest position, and this will also clear some space to get your head out of the way, drive, and drive through. So that'll also help clear a little bit of space for your backwards bar path. The big thing I'll see with the overhead press is instead of that straight line backwards, you'll actually see them curve the bar around their head. And obviously this is just a big waste of energy, and it's gonna make the overhead press way, way harder than it needs to be. The feeling of getting your head out of the way might be uncomfortable at first. Not gonna lie, you're probably gonna catch a few barbells to the chin. It's happened to me, it's happened to everyone in the gym. It's gonna happen, but you'll get used to the timing for it, you'll get used to getting your head out of the way, and it'll be a much easier press for you. If the barbell does happen to get a KO punch in on you though, make sure you get it on camera from your friend. That's viral video material right there. You can start a YouTube channel. Okay, on to the third and final tip for the overhead press. This is probably the weirdest one, but that is to squeeze your butt. Pretty simple cue to understand. All you're doing is getting a nice tight glute position, and this is gonna help stabilize your press so much, it's kind of ridiculous actually. I would actually rate having a nice tight glute position in the overhead press just as important as your strong, big belly breath to get your core nice and tight. Both, I would say, are equally important to your stability overall for the press. But yeah, basically all you're shooting for with squeezing your glutes is you want to be the opposite of an Instagram model. So you are not popping that booty out, you're squeezing those cheeks as close to yourself as possible. I want to see pancake glutes. This is a weird segment. This is a position where it's gonna feel horribly uncomfortable. You're probably gonna think you're squeezing them to the max, and I'm gonna say you're lying. You can probably squeeze them just that much more. But yeah, just as you would tighten your brace as much as possible, you're gonna squeeze your glutes as much as possible. And just like I said, you could possibly catch a barbell to the face with the press thing. You might, catch a cramp in your glutes. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you. Sacrifice to win. Okay, we made it through that. So, those are my top 3 tips for the overhead press, guys. Narrow grip, wide stance, make sure you get that bar path right, and then squeeze the glutes. As far as the overhead press goes, it's really about building up as much stability as you can, and then getting that bar path right. So you want to be as tight as possible from the base all the way up to the top, and then once that bar path is right, you'll have the most efficient press possible. After that, it's all about time and dedication, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you, the overhead press is definitely one of the harder lifts to progress. It is a frustratingly slow lift to progress, and you're gonna have to work for every single 5-pound increment you gain on it. But if you stick with it, it will progress for you. So just be patient with it. It's one of those lists where if you do have a strong overhead press, you're gonna get a lot of props for it because everyone knows you had to put in that time and work to get your overhead press to where it is. There's really no secret cheats out there for the overhead press. You just have to put in the work. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. Thanks so much for watching the video. Hope you learned a thing or two. Thanks so much for stopping by. Hope to see you guys all in a future video, and I'll see you guys